Hello, everybody. Welcome to Paideia. This is the first episode ever. And we just want to welcome Sheena St Clair Jonker. Welcome. My name is Daniel.
Wonderful to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. My name is Daniel. I'll be your mediator for this discussion. And Sheena, why don't you introduce yourself and then we can get going.
So I'm Sheena St Clair Jonker. I am the founder and the runner of ADR Network SA, as well as its associated NPO, Access to Justice. So ADR Network SA is a private dispute resolution agency. We concentrate on alternative dispute resolution methods like mediation, arbitration, and restorative justice. We practice those methods and we teach them as well. And Access to Justice is an associated NPO which exists to mobilize dispute resolution and legal resources where necessary to vulnerable persons and communities within South Africa.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, Sheena and I, we've known each other now for a couple of years, like 3.5 years. So I don't need an introduction, but so just a question. What training program?
Wait a minute, Daniel. Wait a minute.
Yes.
Let's introduce you a little bit, if I may.
Okay.
Daniel qualified in fashion design at CPUT on the Dean's List. As summa cum laude or cum laude.
Cum laude, yeah.
He was involved in the redesign of the graduation gowns as part of the decolonization project. So he's done beautiful work. He's recently moved to Europe, and he and his husband have recently trained as mediators with us. And yeah, Daniel, you can tell us later, but this is just something that Daniel feels that, well, you've taken to it like the proverbial duck to water, haven't you?
Yes, I have indeed. Yeah, no, I've been loving it. And yeah, there's so much to learn. And I think this is where we actually came to the idea and the name of this podcast, which is Paideia. It means deep learning, and this is where Cornell West talks about deep learning, what it is to be human. And I think it is very essential for us as human beings to sit now, especially now that we've had lockdown. A lot of people have lost their jobs, a lot of turmoil around the world, and we have a lot of questions to answer. And one of those is, what does it mean to be human? So in this podcast, what we are going to do is talk about various subjects, add more content for all of our mediators as well. So they can come here, anyone who is interested, or any students who feel like they need to learn more or think about deep discussions, they can come here to us and we will have these discussions. Yes, and we'll also put our contact details if anybody would like to add any feedback to our podcast. And yes, we don't know when we will publish this first one, but it might be a couple of weeks. We'll see how we go with content creation. But yes, currently, what are you busy with, Sheena, with regards to projects that are coming up, and anything that people should know about, or that you think that we could maybe have a little discussion about?
So, Daniel, I think I'd like to just give our friends out there insight into the capacities of alternative dispute resolution. So when we think about alternative dispute resolution and mediation, we tend to think about a very kind of nice clinical environment with two polite disputing parties around a table and a nice mediator, maybe a bit of tea, a bit of water, and everyone's kind of there to get on the same page. And that is some of what it is. But I have found over the last 15 years of practicing alternative dispute resolution, I initially practiced as an attorney for 10 years in the very traditional sense of being immersed in the adversarial system. And I found that the alternative processes can be a better form of access to justice. So I, with a handful of really courageous lawyers and mediators over the years, have done some really beautiful work. So we've done work with Shatwilla communities. I would estimate that about 8,000 families have been shielded from possibly violent and sometimes actual violent eviction due to our interception of the process and advocating for shifting to dialogue. We're not simply just interrupting and saying, you know, people go out there, overrun the land and that kind of thing. We're saying that rapid urbanization is happening due to the historical and prevalent injustices, and that if people in desperation come to the cities to seek jobs, healthcare, and schools, because remember, South Africa is arranged largely with the same spatial injustice that was created, strategically created under apartheid and the 300 years before that. But so we're saying that, well, if people are forced into this desperate situation, we can't simply abide a situation that evicts humans, creates homelessness, creates more social problems for all of us to deal with. So a dialogue process is there to say, okay, well, if they can't settle on this land, and if housing and services can't be created on this land, then what? What are the alternatives? Let's talk about the alternatives. And so we've had some really beautiful outcomes. In one case, the High Court in the Western Cape ended up ordering that the state or the local authority purchases the private land that 5,000 families had settled on, and ordered the local authority to establish a process of housing and services. So that was a really beautiful outcome. We've done work, we do work in the taxi industry, advocating for access to proper consultation. We found that the BRT process, when it rolled out, that's the bus rapid transport system, did not consult with everyone in the industry. So it didn't consult with the taxi drivers and the door operators, leaving them desperate and in circumstances where they had to find ways back into the taxi industry. So our work is ongoing there. Our clients must have a voice. We are there to ensure that a platform is created. So our work is about saying we want a less violent society, but we don't want to regulate violence. We want to take violence out of circulation. Yes. And a law and order kind of culture can, you know, on our programs, we talk about the difference between peacekeeping and peacemaking. We can keep the peace using violent methods, guns, bombs, police, military, courts. We can keep the peace by crushing humans. Yes. We want to make peace. And in order to make peace, we need to sometimes bring about a disruption of the status quo, and then usher in a true peace that is rooted in just circumstances. So all of our work, whether we're mediating a divorce or whether we are mediating a high conflict commercial situation, is about let's bring about an interruption to the course of events, let's stay there, let's stay in the disorder, let's look around, let's learn from what we need to learn long enough for us to help parties to build the courage to find solutions. So, yeah, and as you know, Daniel, we do restorative justice work, which is victim-centric in domestic violence and sexual violence, and we also do a lot of personal injury work. So I've recently been appointed to chair the SA chapter of the International Society for Therapeutic Jurisprudence, which is an intersection between law and healthcare. There's a growing awareness that when we find solutions for people for their legal disputes or the other problems in their lives, we need holistic solutions. So it's right that lawyers start thinking about the wellness of their clients, the wellness of themselves.
Yes.
And this is very exciting because therapeutic jurisprudence emerges out of restorative justice. And we can talk about restorative justice a little bit more, but I want to hear what you had in mind. But I'm starting to look at the links between restorative justice and racial justice. So restorative justice is actually rooted in the indigenous traditions and the faith traditions and the sacred traditions. Restorative justice is a healing justice. It's a justice that restores rather than a punitive justice that says who did what wrong and how should we punish them or how should we catch them out. A restorative justice says if people make bad choices, whether it's in families or communities or businesses or in the workplaces or in a criminal sense, if people are making bad choices, it's for one of two reasons: sickness of the soul or lack of knowledge. The one needs healing and the other needs teaching. And remember that education, when broken down into its root words, means literally leading out of ignorance, which resounds with Paideia, which is the deep learning of enlightenment, the deep learning of lifting the veil, the deep learning of the revelation. So yeah, I can't explain how, although we immersed in the kind of evil of what people do to each other, there are beautiful outcomes, and there are restorative outcomes. So it's healing work. It's healing work. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, you mentioned healing, and I think we also discussed this a couple of times in during the training that we do, our 5-day training course, that a lot of the issues that I don't think it's really issues, but I think a lot that how can I say this? The leading that needs to happen in this world, whether it comes from a teacher or a doctor or a politician or whoever you are, I think if people view themselves as healers, there would be a lot of different discussions happening around the table.
Absolutely.
And yeah, you also mentioned that you're doing racial discussions at the moment. Do you want to tell us a little bit about where we are headed? What are your thoughts? Currently, obviously, there's a lot happening in the media. And quite frankly, what we see on the media is not actually what's necessarily happening in real time in people's lives, but from the people that you've had discussions with. Can you maybe just talk a couple of moments about that?
Yeah, so I just want to go back to something that you said about, seeing ourselves as healers. Now, I think this lockdown has been a unique liminal space. It's been almost like a retreat in some senses. We go back. It's almost, I always joke that God sent us to our rooms think about what we've done.
Yes.
But many of us were not willing to sit there and think about what we've done. And as Eckhart Tolle, our favorite littlest man, he talks about, or he quoted someone recently saying that he thinks that all the problems in the world arise from the fact that humans can't go into their rooms and be still. We can't
2
be
minutes.
still.
Actually, I think he says 2 minutes.
Yeah, we can't find that inner stillness. We can't find that secret place referred to in the Christian tradition, and I'm sure referred to in other traditions. But we can't be still. We can't find our sense of inner stillness. And I think that's where the deep healing is. But in this lockdown, we've seen a lot of stuff manifest. We've seen the fault lines in our society manifest. We've seen that, within a week we couldn't have a lockdown, and people were literally out of food. That's not a system that provides for its people, is it? I mean, and we saw food queues in first world societies like Switzerland. We saw Virgin, what's that guy from Virgin Airlines?
Branson, Richard Branson.
Now, interestingly, he asked the UK government for a bailout in the first couple of weeks, or the first few weeks. Now, isn't that interesting? Because we live in this capitalist world.
Yes.
And yet a billionaire private airline can't even sustain itself for a few weeks.
Yes.
And it goes and asks for a government bailout. And the offensive part of this is that Virgin doesn't even pay tax in the UK. And the billionaires of the world, where Amazon was asking for funding to pay its own employees.
Yes.
Is this a system that's serving us? So that's pretty bizarre, isn't it? It's pretty bizarre.
It is crazy. And
so all these kind of fault lines and these bizarre things were kind of manifested, and then we saw the killing of George Floyd. We saw international outrage, and the manifestation of a widespread consciousness that this is enough, And so I've been following the Black Lives Matter movement for some time, and Opal Tometi, who's a Nigerian American and just brilliant woman. And I've recently started looking into the modern day abolitionism that they're talking about. Abolish the police, abolish the education system, abolish prisons.
Yes.
And frankly, I'm there, but it's not an easy discussion to have. But when you start talking about abolitionism in society, it's not a reformist take. For a long time, I was a law reformist. But how do you reform something, a system that's deeply rooted in settler colonialism and white supremacy? How do you reform a police force, by the way, not police services, a police force, because they use force, that exists mainly to protect property? So you'll find that in protests, the rage is around destruction to property. There's very little paideia around, what about the humans? What about this is symptomatic of humans being kept in a situation where their backs are against the wall. So I think there are Black females in this world, as I say often on our programs, that I think are leading us into a healing portal. And it's in all of our interests. They are trying to create a more humane world.
Yes.
So I'm learning a lot from that, and I'm taking my lead in racial justice and the anti-racism work we're doing at the moment, which, by the way, is deeply difficult work, especially for the likes of you and me, who have to do deeply, deeply self-reflective work and deeply humble work. In circumstances where we are the beneficiaries of a system that has crushed, in our case, Africans, for over 400 years. So what do we do with that, and where do we find our place in this? And I've been running anti-racism dialogues in schools. I was consulted in another one yesterday. It's difficult work. It's very difficult work. But it's also very sad work, because you're sitting there in a situation where African hair, just as an example, is being policed in schools. Teachers are telling African children to relax their hair, to dye their hair black if it's not black enough. And Daniel, I'm not talking about 2 years ago. I'm not talking about 3 years ago. I'm talking about now. I'm talking about last week. How can we abide this? How can we abide? So yeah, you and I established a 3-day anti-racism training dialogue a few weeks ago. It was difficult. It was beautiful. It was all those things. It was paradoxical. It was deeply arresting, in the sense that we have work to do, don't we?
Yes.
You and I,
yes.
the people that look like you and I, have work to do.
Yes.
And I don't have all the answers, but I know that we can't provide cover or allow cover to be provided for a deeply racist and unequal system.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's always, I think, always, we have discussions and, thoughts about, I think this is, where this whole pandemic this is actually a miracle in disguise. And I'm not discrediting anyone's pain that they have suffered through this, because I have not suffered nearly enough pain as other people during this. But, we were heading down a very quick path to self-destruction. And just, it's, moving here to Europe, it's all is, I grew up in South Africa, and it's coming here was not what I expected and envisioned, but that's where the actual learning is, and what I am still going to learn through this whole process. And I think something I wanted to touch base on that totally slipped my mind now, but
we'll come back to it.
We'll come back to it, but it's I think it's almost as if we now, we have to rebuild, and it's just a question of how we're going to do this. And I think a lot of the work that you've been doing over the past 10, 15 years is now coming to light, and this is what we actually need to do going forward, is mediating discussions and sitting around a table of people and just listening. First of all, I think that is one of the other things that we learn on our 5-day program, is to actually just sit and listen. What is it that I actually need to hear, and not in a way of coming up with a response or an answer or a solution or an idea or whatever, but just to sit there and listen, because a lot of people's voices have been drowned out by
brutalized, crushed, absolutely, yeah,
yeah.
distorted.
Yes.
And I think part of the reason that we felt that we wanted to kind of have mediated discussions out there is that that the kind of societal narrative seems very unbalanced, doesn't it? So let's have a look at what happened with clicks and the advert that literally says white is normal and the black hair is damaged and dry and frizzy and that kind of thing. Now we can debate the minutiae, but the point is that there's this ongoing theme that white is the default, and this is hurting us all. This is hurting us all. This is not a humane situation. This is not a good situation. Now, I wrote an article called "Disturbing the Peace," and I put peace in inverted commas, and I said the EFF is leading the way. Now, first of all, I want to say that we as an organization are apolitical in the sense that we're not aligned to any particular party. I personally, I'm not aligned to any party at all. And to the extent that I don't vote, and I won't vote. I'm a mediator. My job is peacemaking. I'm not advocating for other people not to vote, of course not. But in as much as I have a constitutional right not to vote, I don't think there's any party that I would actually vote for if I was going to vote. So I won't vote with my conscience, and they just, I don't like the party political. It's polarized. I think it's very destructive. But having said that, we can take part in the politic, which is the figuring out our shared experience. And how we take part in the politic is by doing work out there that brings about balance, that brings about access to justice, etc., etc. And I write, I put ideas out there, I counter narratives that I personally think are destructive or that I think need balance. And one of the narratives is that, for example, now on the face of it, there were protests by EFF at 437 stores. On the face of it, 37 stores suffered some form of destruction. The worst form of destruction I've seen, it was a petrol bombing where windows got scratched. Am I saying people must go in petrol? Absolutely not. I'm anti-violence. I'm for non-violence. I'm for taking the violence out of the system. But I haven't read any accounts of real kind of injury, death, destruction. Do you know what I'm saying? We also don't know the context of how those protests might have become violent. We don't know if it was outside agitators. We know that there were militia that went in to try and counter the protest. So of course, some of these are going to turn violent, but 37 out of 400 stores, does that mean those protests were largely violent, or were they largely peaceful? It means that over 90% of them were peaceful and disciplined. And the result was the protests were called off a day early. There was acknowledgement of harm, there was apology, and there were reparations. Those are all restorative justice precepts. Those are all restorative justice precepts. Yet there's still this narrative out there, you know, now I've seen ridiculous narratives that this was born in racketeering. What the hell? What the hell? I also I received a large amount of support for my blog. There were 3 or 4 comments with violent language, and they all came from white men and directed at me. So we kind of need to have these conversations. I then wrote a follow-up blog about restorative justice and racial justice, and how 40 years of restorative justice as a counterbalance to the traditional adversarial system has not seen a lot of restorativists venture into the territory of racial justice work. So you find that restorative justice practitioners have not ventured into that territory, and by the same token, activists in racial justice haven't ventured into the territory of restorative justice. And so we need to start balancing the warrior and the healer archetypes. Restorative justice is very associated with the healer archetype. Activism is associated with the warrior archetype. What if we balance those? What if we bring those together? What if the estranged cousins of activists, lawyers, and peacemakers started to talk again and started to realize how interconnected their work is? As the abolitionists are saying now, what if police in society started seeing themselves as healers? What if teachers started seeing themselves as healers? Isn't that what we need? What if lawyers started seeing themselves as healers? What if doctors started seeing themselves as healers?
Yes. What if we ourselves
all started seeing ourselves as healers?
No.
So what about the warrior archetype? Well, the examples of the warrior archetype bringing about healing, the Messiah. The Messiah are very warrior-like, but in protection of their children. It's very child-centric society. The pipeline activists in the Native Americans that protected their sacred land from the archetype, from the pipeline installation. You saw warrior and healer energy coming together, even in ritual and symbolic demonstration. But it wasn't the warrior type of energy that says, you know, let's go to war, let's shoot people, let's bomb the shit out of people to bring peace. We are saying that a false peace exists where everything looks calm, but there is no justice. It's a false peace where everything looks calm, but not everyone has what they need. And some people have way more than what they need, which, by the way, could be killing them as well when it comes to consumption and indulgence and all that kind of thing. We know the state of dis-ease comes from us not being in harmony with all of creation, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, these are the things that we think about, and it's a lifelong process, and I think that's what brings it back to Paideia, is that it, as Cornell West says, what is a life worth living if you don't actually learn anything, but not the artificial learning of A, B, and C and colors or this and that, but the deep inner work of sitting and thinking, and I think that is also, you know, with regards to my education, and yes, I was very privileged and fortunate to, go to a very good school, and then, be able to go to varsity and learn. But I think the biggest lesson that I have learned from all of my education is one of my lecturers once said, you have to question everything in this world. Do not take it for what it is. Question it and sit with it. And that's still, if someone says something, what are they saying? Is their language violent? For who do I hear that as violence, or do they say that as violence? Is that their fourth or fifth language that they are speaking in to me? Am I listening and hearing in my first or second language?
Yeah.
This language, that we are speaking, is it the predominant language that was basically forced upon people, if you really go back into history? But another point is that I think there's a TED talk, we'll put on a link for anybody who would like to go view it, where language actually shapes our reality and the language that we use. And this is also discussions that we've had, is that before you even utter the words, there's a thought.
Yeah.
But that thought is the words already. But what comes before that, and that's the stillness that we sit with. And where do we find that, and how do we find that? And I think, mediation is a form of meditation in a sense, because it really you as the mediator need to sit in that stillness, in that 0 point of nothingness. And that's why Sheena, mentioned being apolitical. I mean, we as a human being who lives, let's say, on an average for 72 years, what do we actually know of this world that we can definitely say that this is the way things are and should be and continue? So,
yeah. I just want to go back to Cornell West. So there's this beautiful part where he talks about, he teaches philosophy and theology at Harvard, and his first year students come in, and he says, "Welcome to my class. Today you're going to learn how to die." And he says the students look at him with big eyes and they say, "But Professor West, we thought this was philosophy class. We thought we were going to, read through some text, learn some stuff, learn some theories, some principles." And he says, no, you have to learn how to think first. You have to learn how to laugh first. You have to learn how to play first. And he says there's a necessary death that takes place in figuring out what it means to be human. And he talks about humando is rooted in the word for burial. There's a burial that takes place. He says that this life is learning how to die before you die. So when we are led out of deeply entrenched stereotypes, deeply entrenched assumptions, deeply held beliefs, there's a necessary death that takes place. So and then he talks about how his students come there all professional, pre-professional, like coming to learn a profession, and they're going to go and practice a profession out there. And he says often professionalism delivers us up the most damaging conformity, complacency. And when we as humans are required to courageously show up, then our courage might fail us. So then he points back to the Greek tradition, the Socratic tradition of of the unexamined life is not worth living.
Mm.
So as you know, in our mediation training programs, it's a constant learning, self-reflection. It's deep paideia, isn't it? It's deep paideia. It's not a set of how-tos. Yeah, there are the how-tos, but it's not a set of ABC. You remember that, we examine you. No, it's the deep learning. What are you going to take forward? What are you going to commit to? What are you going to commit to as lifelong learning? It's the learning of the universal pattern, isn't it? The universal pattern of, once there was order, then there was disorder or chaos, then there's a reordering. That pattern shows up everywhere, doesn't it? In the universe, in our lives, in our relationships. You married? Does that show up in your relationship? Once there was order, then there was disorder or chaos, then there's a reordering. Okay, so it really matters what we do in that situation of disorder or chaos. We stand there, we wait there, we look around. Paideia Otuhama, the Irish philosopher, talks about looking around, listening long enough to see, hear, learn what needs to be seen, heard, learned before we move on into re-establishing order. It's in the classroom. Once there was order, then there's disorder or chaos, then there's a reordering. How are we going to get to the reordering? By crushing people, by medicating them, by sending them out, by suspending them, excluding them. That's what we like to do, and it's not serving us. It's not serving us. By severing the relationship, not necessarily serving us. Some relationships need to be severed. But what do we do in that disorder or chaos? That's where we come in. That's where the mediator comes in, to sit there long enough, to build the courage, to be in that situation of discomfort long enough, to look, see, hear what needs to be seen, heard, and learnt before we can find the solution to the problem. And sometimes that takes, like the story of Job, it said that his friends sat there in the dark with him for 10 days, on the ground, in the dark, not knowing what to say. Sometimes that's what we're there for, sitting on the ground in the dark for 10 days, if that's what's necessary, not knowing what to say, just being there, just being with, providing a space, providing a sacred space for people to look, learn, see, hear, feel what needs to be seen, heard, felt, listened to, learnt, before we can move on to the next phase of reordering. And then there's going to be the next phase of disorder. We're in a phase of disruption now. We're in a phase possibly of a collateral reordering of things and a collateral disrupting of things. It happens all the time. But we are there to remain with for as long as it takes. To identify possible solutions to the problem. And we don't always find the solutions to the problems, do we?
No.
But we have a high degree of hope that there are solutions to every problem. With enough courage and with enough forbearance, patience, forbearance, all those high virtues, that we all need to learn, don't we?
Yes.
When you talk about the violence of language, we all have violent impulses, don't we? We've been raised in a world that uses violent methods to solve the problem of violence. It doesn't work, does it? But we still have those default patterns, the way we think, the way we speak, the way we act, sometimes the words we use. But we've committed to trying to give ourselves less permission to be cruel, haven't we? In every single way that we encounter ourselves being cruel, in every single way, that we face up to the fact that we've given ourselves a lot of permission to be cruel, haven't we? All of us. Yeah. And so, yeah. Sorry, I went on a bit long there.
No, it's beautiful. Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier with Cornel West, you know, I love him. Anybody who haven't seen him, he's quite an amazing human being.
Yeah.
And when he talks about death, you know, it's we haven't come to terms with, I think, as a civilization, and you know, I don't like generalizing, but I think the way things are going is we haven't come to terms with death itself, and that is at the end of our own lives. You know, what happens? You know, we don't know. We actually really we don't know, and
there's not a human alive that really knows what happens.
Yes,
yeah.
And when he talks about death, I think it is. I mean, death comes with tremendous sadness, but I think if we understand that death is necessary for new life and for new ideas, and this could be the death of religion. This could be a death of your own perceptions of what this world is, your own upbringing, your own culture, your own language, your own ways of doing things, your thinking, whatever it is. But it's and that's why he says, you know, you need to come to terms with death before death finds you, or you know, understand death before death, you know, is at your door, because it's not worth living if you haven't asked those questions. And and I think that is, and that comes also to back to order, chaos, reorder. It's that as soon as you peel off another layer of whatever it is that needs to die and dissolve, what is still left after that? How deep have you gone? How far do you still need to go?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, another one of my favorite teachers is Richard Rohr, and he's a Christian in the Catholic tradition, but he writes amazing stuff. And I've learned so much in his latest book is the universal pattern, order, disorder, chaos, order, disorder, or chaos, and reorder. But he talks about how religion as a system of membership, who's in, who's out, is religion at its worst. Religion as something there for the deep transformation of the human being is religion at its best, isn't it? And he talks about how we transform primarily on two bases: deep love, which he talks about as being a luminous experience, and deep suffering. Deep love and deep suffering. And he says that we know that, don't we, Daniel? It's suffering that can change us. Or it's an encounter with the divine that can change us. But we know these things. That's how the whole thing is set up. And he says that we need to be present at more births and more deaths. And there's something about that, isn't there? There's something very I've never been present at a death, but there's something deeply grounding and otherworldly about holding your first and your second newborn baby. There's nothing. There's no strongest sense that I've ever had, that I've kind of glimpsed beyond the stars, like glimpsed beyond the realm. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Other than my conversations with your husband, Jonathan, that can really make you feel like you've had an encounter with who knows what.
It's more the stars around your head.
Just
Yes, this is new life, living at home and stuff happening in the background, but that's fine.
I'm sorry about, we in lockdown, we're forgiving, well, we're in phase 2 lockdown, but my family and myself are still living at level 4. So I'm still doing all my work from home, and if you hear the odd bad dog bark or door open or figure appear at the door and say he's hungry, then we're forgiving about stuff like this. I mean, usually you have a voice in the background shouting comments and that kind of thing, don't you,
Yes,
Daniel?
I do.
Where is that voice, from above or from below, should we say?
No, he's in the bedroom. I've asked him nicely to sit there for a few moments with
And think
hopefully
about what
stillness.
he's done.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. You guys have been frenemies for about 20 years almost. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll be frenemies till death do us part. We must actually have him on the show at some stage.
Yeah, no, I think we've got a lot of people to have discussions with, and we've got an extensive list of people that we're going to bring on. So
I think, Daniel, it seems to me people are starting to open my door and that kind of thing. So I'm probably sitting here on borrowed time, but possibly let's just say this. There are 2 projects that we currently involved in: 100 days of divorce mediation. So we are going to be doing a pro bono day of divorce mediation training for kind of court officials and social workers and that kind of thing that work in and around divorce in court. That's exciting. There are going to be opportunities for our mediators to help with that backlog. So those that are trained but haven't yet done a real mediation, want to observe, want to get stuck in, want to do some vocational learning, there are wonderful opportunities coming up in that. We have also started working specifically with mediators in the medico-legal space, personal injury, medical negligence, and road accidents. So we are engaged with SAMLA's pilot project with the RAF, and it's an exciting thing that the RAF, the biggest litigator in the country, is looking to shift its litigation model to mediation. So there's some real concrete opportunities for mediators to go out there and make a career out of it, which is wonderful. We have so many lawyers and others, psychologists, teachers, business people, coming onto the program and saying, "This is it. I feel like I'm home. I feel like I'm home." And you can be home, and there's kind of a convergence of events with Rule 41A of the High Court now saying that the parties need to explore the possibility of mediation in every matter, at least. And there's been this lockdown that's ground a lot of the problem-solving institutions to a halt. So the courts have come to a close and that kind of thing. It's been a strange time. But our work has continued. It's continued seamlessly, and it's increased. because ADR is resilient, it's responsive, it can be set up immediately on a platform like this, economically. I mean, you sitting there in Belgium, I'm sitting in the promised land, Hillcrest, Durban, KZN, and look at this. It's like we're together, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is.
We've had role plays where one person's been in Uganda, some people have been in Belgium, some people in Limpopo, and it works, doesn't it?
It does.
It works.
It does.
So we of course need to advocate for accessibility to Wi-Fi access and that kind of thing, which we are doing something of.
It's always the funniest part. To see Sheena's expression, like, no. It's like, 3 minutes. Cheers. I suppose you can take a moment of silence.
I'm so sorry, I had to sign something. Our washing machine stopped working, and the warrantors have come to take it away so it can be fixed or replaced. So yeah, there was a state of disorder where we were dealing with mountains of backed up washing for a number of weeks. We actually took some down to the laundry yesterday. What a feeling of freedom. But anyway, I digress.
No.
Yeah, so there's some very, very exciting opportunities coming up. As I said, that I'm going to be chairing the SA chapter of the International Society for Therapeutic Jurisprudence. So I will be sending out mail information to our followers. You guys are setting up ADR Network Europe.
Indeed. And you are also working with Uganda at the moment.
Absolutely. We're setting up ADR Network East Africa. Africa, concentrating on Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya first, but we'll expand to other regions, hopefully Nigeria, and all over Africa. You know, that's the ultimate aim. But yeah, we've met some beautiful people over this lockdown time, haven't we? We've learned, we've laughed, as Cornel West would say. We're probably going to have an acting award ceremony for the role players. We're going to have a graduation ceremony,
yes,
a network-wide graduation ceremony, probably in January.
Yes.
You're going to design the gowns for us, aren't you?
Indeed. Already busy with it. So, yeah,
exactly.
Exciting things happening. So, and I think on that note, maybe we should say adios, amigos, and goodbye.
I'm sorry about the disorder stroke chaos phase that happened a few times, but you know, that's the universal pattern. We have to be used to it and not scared of it.
Exactly. We took a moment of silence there on the last disruption, and I think whoever's listening or watching is going to probably need to sit and feel there like, oh my word, what is happening? It's so long that they're quiet, but yeah, we'll take a moment if we need to. But yeah, thank you, Sheena. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yes,
let me know who you've got lined up to interview, and can I be there?
You can.
Sorry, may I be there?
Yes, you may indeed. But yeah, thanks everybody. Well, any comments or any feedback, you're more than welcome to send it to us, and then I'll put all the details in the links below. And yes, see you next time.
Excellent. Bye. Thanks, Daniel. Cheers.
Bye.
Peace, son.